So today I have something very cool for you. Check this out. Okay, so this is something very special. So I reached out to the guys at Dr.Z and ordered this amp a little while ago. And when I did that, I did not ask for a discount, didn't ask for the amp for free, nothing like that. But what I did ask them for was something that they hadn't done before. I asked them if they would record building the amp start to finish and let me show it to you guys. They loved the idea. Mike and Frank, you guys were so awesome to work with. It made me like the brand even more, working with them on something like this. So let's see what we got here, and then we'll dive into the footage of how this amp was actually made. And the big reveal, boom! It's a Z-Rec. There we go, get it in focus. Whew, thing's a little heavy. So the Z-Rec is a very special Dr.Z amp. Now, before we get into all that though, I did reach out to the guys at Sweetwater and they were very nice and decided to sponsor the video, so thank you to Sweetwater. They're actually a Dr.Z dealer, so if you're interested in any of this stuff, check it out and use their financing, all that kind of stuff. Even though I got mine directly from Dr.Z, you know, check out Sweetwater. I have all that stuff listed below, and a big old thank you to them. And while you're at it, if you like these behind the scenes videos, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button because I'd like to do more of them. So like I was saying, the Z-Rec is a very special amp. And this was a collaborative design between Ken Fisher of the famous Trainwreck amps and Mike or Dr.Z whenever they built this amp together. And if you look at the handwriting on here, this is actually Ken's handwriting when they were sending the amps back and forth to each other. They left this on here. It's like a really cool tribute to him. Ken has unfortunately passed away at this time, but it's just a cool collaboration and it really doesn't sound like anything else. It really has a unique sound to it. So let's go ahead and see what it inspired me to play as soon as I got it. Okay, so it's probably going to be a pretty long video, but let's go ahead and check out how the amp was built. Now, I am going to throw in some clips at the very end of the amp out of the mix. I know I did it with drums and all that stuff just now, but if you want to hear the amp kind of out of the mix with a couple different guitars, that'll be at the end of the video. But let's go ahead and see how the Z-Rec is made.
Hey guys, Dr. Z here. I'd like to thank Robert Baker for putting together this excellent video about the Z-Rec. It kind of shows from inside our shop, from picking the parts to building, testing, QA, and final test of the Z-Rec amp. It's got everything in there that I believe you'll find pretty interesting. So sit back and enjoy. Thanks.
Hey guys, I wanted to hop in here real quick for this section because this is meant to be just more of a fly on the wall situation. We're seeing the amp come together. A little bit later on, you know, Mike is nice enough to give us some insight into what he's doing and why he's doing it. But this is not a how to build a tube amp. You know, these are all hand-wired amps, and I love seeing just how, I mean, obviously, but how hands-on the process is. Like, it makes me appreciate the amp. It makes me appreciate this footage. So great job, Mike, and great job, Frank, for shooting this footage. It is amazing, and I love seeing this stuff. So anyways, I will now stop blabbing, and let's just enjoy what we have here.
You gonna pull any other parts?
I could get sockets, I guess.
little deoxidizing. Yeah, do that same thing.
Everyone has their own way, you know.
Ready when you are. You want to comment on what you're wiring?
Yeah, right now I'm wiring the rectifier tube. And that's right on the octal socket where the rectifier sits. I always like to tin my wire before I solder. This way there's solder on there and it makes a real good positive connection. And that is, you go to the junction where the two wires are and the connection, and you leave the iron on it for 2-3 seconds to get both components hot, and then you melt the solder. And it just flows then, and you get a good positive solder. And you know it's good when it's shiny. Same thing over here. Put the tip of the soldering iron onto the connection and the wire. Count to 3 or so. And then melt some solder. Okay, then I just trim off the excess. This shows the input to the 5-volt rectifier. This is the 5-volt filament. This is the output, which goes to the standby switch. So this is where the high voltage comes out. And that's that. Soldering in the outputs to the speakers, the 4, 8, and 16 ohm. Just trimming off the excess wire right now after it's soldered. Now I'm going to wire in the comfort and speed switch. And basically this takes the output from the rectifier and either runs it to one side of the power transformer or the other to give different output voltages from the power transformer. And that's how speed and comfort is developed. Higher voltage is speed, a little bit more punch, and a little bit lower voltage is comfort, a little softer. As we were developing this, Ken Fisher and myself, Ken likes the little bit lower voltage on the EL84s. He kind of likes a little bit, slightly over 300 volts, which gives a smoother, kind of a softer kind of output. And I like a little bit higher. I like, 330 or so, 320, 330, which gives a little bit more percussive and punchy kind of output on the EL84s. So as we were developing this, Ken and I, and sending samples back and forth to Brad, I had a power transformer designed that had multiple taps, meaning that it could either do 300 or 330. And I put it on a switch and sent it to Brad and said, Brad, which one do you like better? We'll decide which one we're going to use. And of course, Brad said, I like them both. I like this for this and this for that. I want both of them. So it ended up being that the amp then came with a bit more expensive power transformer with dual primaries and then the switch to select. Okay, yeah, I'm just finishing up the power supply wiring. This is the little power supply board with the capacitors, dropping resistors. Again, I like to tin the wires that aren't tinned from the factory. Just make for a better connection. Once I put solder on it, there's already solder inside the wire. So it really makes a nice connection. I like to make sure that I've got a really good physical connection by squeezing it together and then soldering it for a great electrical connection. So there's both physical and electrical. And again, I go back to my NASA soldering, where you put the soldering iron on the pin you're soldering, as well as the wire. Let them both heat up for 2-3 seconds, and then just melt the solder, have the solder just flow, and it'll flow all around, be nice and shiny, and you'll have a really good positive solder. When this amp was being designed and gone back and forth to Ken Fisher and myself, Kenny likes to have a separate power supply board that's separated from the preamp board. So they're kind of isolated and well grounded individually. So that's why this has what I call a power supply board, which has the filter caps, dropping resistors that feed the preamp board, and then the preamp board itself that feeds the preamp tube sockets. Okay, starting to do the QA on the Z-Rec. And basically what I do is I check all the connections first, and that's basically what I'll be doing. And when I check them, I just kind of mark it with a Sharpie. Not only tell me that I did it and did every one, but also look at them as I inspect them. So I'm doing the sockets right now. Just looking for cold solder joints, making sure the connection's good, and then marking it that I inspected it. Okay, and to verify, now that I got all the sockets and pots checked, I'm onto the circuit board, and now the wire connections from the board to the sockets, I like to just take and do a little twist on each one. This assures me that they're not just wrapped and unsoldered, but they're soldered. So it just makes sure that every solder connection is good and tight. So then once everything has been checked, now I'll go back and just mark each connection. This mark on the turrets is also, is good to show that it's been inspected. But also, if I ever get the amp back and I see that it's missing, it gives me a sign that someone's been in the amp and replaced a part or soldered on something. So it's a little telltale sign for me as well that the amp has not been messed with. I'd always like to put my initial somewhere on the amp that I did it. So there's that. I use the D100L, which is a really great contact cleaner and conductor. And I put a drop into each socket's hole on every amp I build. Makes for a better connection and also limits any kind of oxidation years from now. I'll install the preamp tubes. I use the Tungsol 12AX7s. Man, they're great. Probably one of the best preamp tubes being built currently today. And they do kind of sound nice in a Vox style amp, because they do have a nice little shimmer to them. Okay, in the Z-Rec, I use the Ken Fisher approved 6N14Ns, which are the military grade new old stock tubes from Russia. This quad here was built in 1985, so that's how old these are. The pins get a little bit oxidized, you know, they're some 40 years old, so I generally just take a small little file, and before I insert the tubes, I just try to clean off any oxidation that might be there. As you know, I already did put the deoxidant in the socket. So once they're cleaned and they're deoxed, you get a great connection. So I do that to each tube. This is also a good idea to do for you guys that use new old stock tubes on your amps. Take a look at the pins, from age and just sitting around, they will get a little oxidized. And you want them to be clean for the best connection. Okay, I also like to just put a little bit of this deoxit spray on, just to kind of get the any of the oxidation off that I just filed that might be on the pins. Insert the tube, and then I use a ring on the top of this spring connector to put a nice pressure on the tube and eliminate any form of vibration, so you don't get tube rattle. We don't want that, do we? These tubes are tested and matched by Frankie in my shop here. They're 47.4 output. And these are tested up quads that Frankie tests for me. And we put together, as we do buy these tubes in bulk. Just kind of like to give a little bend, just to put a little additional pressure on the spring. Get a nice tight match. And then I just kind of bend these up so that when it goes in the cabinet, they won't be up against the back of the cab or the grill. So I'm ready to power up the amp. I have my load connected, and I'm powering up through my brown box. I just make sure then that my brown box is set for a nice consistent 120 volts. I'm in an industrial area, so incoming power does fluctuate from day to day. So I set my knobs pretty much around 12 o'clock initially. And I'll be looking at my scope and inserting a signal. And the signal is approximately 1K, 1 kilohertz. And that's about a guitar level, minus 40, minus 25 dB. So there's the output. Yeah, looks nice. Nice clip signal. There's our clean output. And there's comfort and speed. As you can see, speed kind of boosted up. It's a little bit higher plate voltage. And comfort's just a touch lower, a little softer. And that's pretty much it. Primarily, what would be the input voltage to the output tubes? As you can see, it's 327.5. Can you see that, Frank? Or do I need to move my meter?
Yeah, why don't you throw it right there? Yeah.
Okay, and if I go to comfort, that should drop it down. So you got 292 or 293 or 330, if you will. So now I'll take the amp and put it on the burn-in rack, and it'll burn for 24 hours with pink noise running through it. And again, another form of the QA. This takes and makes sure if there's a bad tube or a bad component, we'll find it here and fix it before it goes out to you. Okay, here's our burn-in rack. And there's 3 amps burning right now. And I'll put out this Z-Rec that I just did. Plug in power. Plug in the dummy load. And then the signal, which is generally peak noise. I just run peak noise through the amp, so all frequencies are being run through it. Power it up. There's the scope. And you can't just make sure that it's working. And you can see the scope there. Turn the volume down a little bit so you can see it there. And that's it. Let it sit for a day, 8 hours or so. And then it's ready to go into the cabinet and be play tested and packed. Okay, so, we do log each amp where they're going. This was a Z-Rec head. It goes to Robert Baker. And it's kind of a cool serial number. It's number 700. So this is the 700th Z-Rec that we built. So 31700. There was a 49, was it? I think
47.4.
47.4. We kind of logged the tubes if we need to send some out or whatever. We have that. And I just signed the book. And I'll put the serial number on the chassis. Okay.
Wasn't for these players, I wouldn't be doing this at all. I'm drilling it all. Quarter.
And there we have it, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate that. Thank you again to Frank and Mike for shooting all this footage for us. And above all else, just making such an awesome amp. It just knocked it out of the park. I loved getting to see this. It made me appreciate the amp so much more. And like I said, I loved seeing how many people were involved in making it. So also thank you to Sweetwater for sponsoring the video. Like I said, check these out. Sweetwater does carry Dr.Z. And if you want a Z-Rec or something like that, just what a great brand to support. Dr.Z, they got it all. So other than that, I will see you guys all later. And I'm gonna let you guys into bluesy this time. So whoever's got a guitar in their hand, you know what to do. Bye, guys.